We're going deep today. Into a legal document, actually. The Jeffrey Epstein indictment.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
It is, but, this case, there's so much sensationalism surrounding it. We're going to kind of peel all that away
Yeah.
and just focus on the legal mechanics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what are the actual charges here?
Right. Getting to the substance of it.
Exactly, yeah. And to do that, we are going straight to the source.
The source material.
The indictment document, filed in the Southern District of New York.
Yep.
So this is it. This is the prosecution's case, laid out in detail.
Roadmap, basically.
A roadmap. Okay, so if we're looking at this as a roadmap, what are the major landmarks we should be watching out for?
Okay, so first thing you'll notice is the locations. Epstein's residences in New York, Palm Beach, they're mentioned a lot.
Repeatedly.
Yeah, and it's not just about placing him at the scene. I think, it's about this pattern of behavior. You start to get a sense of a system.
Yeah, okay, so it's strategic. They're not just saying he did this bad thing. They're building a narrative.
Of a system. Yeah, exactly.
About systematic abuse.
Yeah, and the language they use about the victims, it's very deliberate, too. Enticed, recruited, It paints a picture of a calculated kind of
Manipulation.
Manipulation, yeah. Not just random encounters.
And then you get the detail that, I mean, this is what gets me. The victims' ages.
Yeah.
It states explicitly they were as young as 14.
Yeah.
That he knew their ages, and that he allegedly specifically sought out vulnerable minors.
Yeah, this is not just crossing a line. This is preying on people who can't legally consent.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. That's the crucial point here. This power imbalance, right?
Yeah.
It's not a he said, she said. It's an adult in a position of power, allegedly exploiting minors who are legally and developmentally unable to give consent.
Right, and it goes even deeper. Because they don't just start with Epstein. It names employees. Employee 1, Employee 2, Employee 3. And these were people who allegedly played various roles in facilitating the encounters.
This is where things get really interesting from a legal strategy perspective.
Right.
So they're opening the door to conspiracy charges by naming these employees. Aiding and abetting, right?
Right. So even if these employees weren't directly participating in the abuse, they could still be held legally accountable for helping to make it happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And it also, I think, serves a dual purpose and widens the net of potential culpability. And it also, it puts pressure on these people
to cooperate.
Maybe they become witnesses. Maybe they, are leveraged to get higher up.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the location, the language, the ages of the victims, the involvement of employees. It's like they're putting a puzzle together here.
Right.
And each one of these is a crucial piece.
Yeah, and there's the financial aspect, too. The indictment mentions that he allegedly paid victims hundreds of dollars in cash after each encounter.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this isn't just some salacious detail. This is actually evidence. It speaks to a pattern.
A transactional
exchange, which goes to the larger narrative of exploitation. And then that brings us to the second count in the indictment, sex trafficking.
Yeah, and that's where the scope of the case explodes. It's not about these individual instances anymore. They're alleging that he was operating a criminal enterprise.
A network.
Yeah, a network designed to traffic minors, to exploit and traffic minors.
Wow, and they're serious. To hammer home the seriousness of this charge, they've included forfeiture allegations. They're going after his property, 9 East 71st Street in New York City, if he's found guilty.
Asset forfeiture, this is a big tool in these kinds of cases. It's not just punishment, it's about dismantling the infrastructure of the crime.
Yeah, it sends a message. Like, this isn't just about one man. It's about, the resources that fuel this operation.
Exactly, yeah.
And it gets even wilder. They mention the possibility of substitute assets. So that means they could seize other property if that specific mansion, if that one isn't available.
Right. It's a safeguard against, hiding assets, transferring assets.
Closing off the escape routes.
Yeah. To make sure that the law can be applied fully.
This indictment, it's like a trap, carefully laid trap.
Yeah.
They're not just accusing, they're strategically building a case here.
Right.
Designed to be airtight. But as we're kind of going through all this, the legal details, we can't forget there are real people involved.
Oh, absolutely.
At the heart of this.
Yes. And that's something that that we'll explore more, as we go deeper into this indictment, what it means not just for Epstein himself, but for the systems that, allowed this to go on.
The systems that allowed this alleged operation to go on.
Right.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the weeds, with all the legal stuff. But when you kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture here,
Implications.
it's pretty staggering. We're talking about a potential network of individuals, a whole system that might have gone unchecked for years.
Yeah. I mean, it raises so many questions, right? Like, how deep does this go? Who else knew?
Right.
I mean, the indictment doesn't answer that,
No.
but it's definitely a starting point, for an investigation that could go really, really far.
And we also can't forget that this case, it's not just about one man's actions,
Right.
allegedly.
Yeah.
This has really sparked a much broader conversation
Societal conversation.
about power, about wealth, and about accountability. How could someone like Epstein, with all his connections, with all his resources, how could this go on, allegedly, for so long?
Right. And that's a question that goes way beyond the legal, the legal system.
Right.
It forces us to confront some pretty uncomfortable truths about systems, about the systems that protect privilege.
Yeah.
And silence the vulnerable. And the indictment focuses on these specific crimes, but it shines a light on something much bigger, this issue of abuse of power when it goes unchecked.
Yeah, it's like this crack in the facade.
Yeah.
You get this glimpse behind the curtain
Of wealth and
influence. And it's pretty disturbing what we're seeing.
Yeah, and I think particularly disturbing is the how this case intersects with this issue of sex trafficking.
Yeah.
This isn't just about, individual encounters. It's a system, a system of exploitation. And it allegedly spanned, all these different places, and it involved moving people across state lines.
The indictment specifically highlights his travel, like between New York and Florida. It's almost like they're mapping out the roots of this operation.
Yeah, like a trafficking operation. And by, including this trafficking charge, I think they're sending a very specific message. This is not just, isolated events. This was calculated. This was an effort to exploit and profit
From vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes you think about, the victims, these young girls caught in this web. And the indictment lays out the charges, but it can't fully capture the human cost.
The trauma that this has, inflicted.
Yeah, it's important to remember that, behind all the legal terminology,
To human stories.
there are real stories
Of pain.
and suffering.
Yeah.
And those stories need to be heard, not just, as part of the legal case, but in a larger conversation.
Absolutely.
About how we protect people.
Yeah.
And hold perpetrators accountable.
People accountable. Yeah.
Because ultimately, this is about more than just Epstein. This is about creating a society where this just doesn't happen.
Right.
Where the powerful are held to the same standard as everyone else, and where victims are empowered to speak up.
Yeah.
And seek justice.
And that requires, I think, a real shift in thinking.
Yeah.
We need to look beyond the surface. We need to look at the systems that allow this to happen. The indictment might be the end of one chapter, but it's definitely just the beginning of this bigger story about accountability and justice.
Yeah, and a more equitable society.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the legal strategy. We talked about the potential scope of this network and the bigger societal implications. But I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The role of the employees. Employee 1, Employee 2, Employee 3. Their involvement raises some really interesting questions. From an ethical standpoint. On the one hand, they were employees.
Yeah.
Potentially just following orders, doing their job.
Right, doing what they were told.
But on the other hand, the indictment says they were actively involved in facilitating encounters, scheduling, even allegedly participating in the abuse. Where's the line?
Where's the line between following orders and being complicit? I mean, that's the gray area here that the prosecution is trying to figure out.
Yeah, and it's a question that probably weighed heavily on their decision, to name these individuals in the indictment.
Because, by naming them, it's not just an accusation, it's pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suddenly they're not just employees, they're potential witnesses.
Potential witnesses.
For bargaining chips.
Bargaining chips.
In a much bigger game.
It's like chess.
Right.
Every move can change the whole board. And while, this legal battle is playing out, there's this whole other battle happening in the court of public opinion.
Right.
And that's where things get, kind of tricky. because public perception is shaped by so many different things. The media,
Yeah.
social media, personal biases. It's hard to sort it out sometimes.
Right.
The fact from the speculation, the evidence from, all the noise.
And that's where the indictment is really important, because it is this grounding force.
It's a document.
It's a legal document.
Yeah.
It's allegations based on evidence
Yeah.
gathered by investigators. This isn't a gossip column.
Right.
It's the starting point for a serious process, a serious legal process.
And while that's all happening, we have to remember there are victims here, at the center of this. Their voices need to be heard. Their stories deserve respect, and they deserve our support.
Yes, absolutely. And their pursuit of justice. That extends beyond Epstein. This is about holding anyone accountable, anyone who was complicit, anyone who turned a blind eye, anyone who enabled this whole system.
This system of exploitation, yeah. And it's about using this case as a starting point for change, to examine the structures that allow this to happen, and to work towards a society where power isn't a shield.
Right.
Where wealth doesn't buy you a free pass, and where the voices of the vulnerable are heard and they're believed.
It's really easy to get caught up in all this.
Go back and forth.
The back and forth.
Yeah.
The strategies, who's going to say what's going to happen. But we have to remember, this is bigger than Epstein.
Much bigger, yeah.
This case, it shows us that this can happen anywhere.
Anywhere. Any level of society. Makes you wonder about your own community, your own institutions. How is power being used,
Right. Because it's not just about, these big names or huge amounts of money. It's about recognizing the signs.
The signs, yeah.
Of exploitation, of abuse, even in, everyday places.
Yeah.
And speaking up.
When you see something.
When something's wrong. Even if it feels, I don't know.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable, yeah.
Yeah. And believing people. Believing survivors.
Right.
Making sure they feel safe.
Safe to come forward.
Safe to come forward, that they'll be heard.
Supported.
Supported, that they'll be taken seriously. That's how we stop this.
Break the cycle. So this indictment, it's not just a document.
Yeah.
It's like a call to action.
It is, yeah.
We all have a role to play in making sure this doesn't happen.
In creating a world where this isn't tolerated. And that starts with, I think, education, Understanding how power and control work. Recognizing the signs. We need to be able to spot this before it happens. And if we do see it happening, we have to know what to do.
How to respond.
How to respond, call the authorities, get them support, be there for them.
Advocate for them.
Advocate, yeah. We got to realize that staying silent.
Silence is complicity.
It's complicity. Turning away just makes it worse. Takes guts to speak up.
But it's on us. This deep dive, this whole thing, it's been intense.
Heavy.
Yeah. Complicated, but so important. I think, it's made us think about some stuff.
Uncomfortable truths.
Uncomfortable truths, yeah. And how we can, each do something to make things better, to create a world that's safer, more just.
And as we, kind of move on from this, let's not forget these lessons. We got to stay vigilant, informed, and committed to protecting people and making sure that people are held accountable, because justice delayed
is justice denied.
That's it.
So we're wrapping up this deep dive. But we hope you keep digging, stay informed, talk about this stuff, because this fight, it's not over.
It's going to take all of us.
It takes all of us.
Well,